morning and happy Friday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Danielle Fowler, and I'm the current chair of the CLE Committee of the Elder Law Section. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the Elder Law Section to our board certification boot camp. I would also like to introduce our amazing panelists. Jason Waddell is a board certified elder law attorney, and in addition to board certification, Jason is a past chair of the elder law section and has received several awards and designations, such as the Florida Bar Elder Law Section Member of the Year in 2013 and 2014, and in 2016, the Florida Bar President's Pro Bono Service Award for the First Judicial Circuit. Jennifer Aiken is a founder and managing attorney of J. Aiken Law. She is a member of both the New York and Florida Bar. She has 8 years of experience in practicing, and she just recently got board certified. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amy Fansall is going to be joining us later, but she is board certified in both elder law and wills, trust, and estates. She's on the board of legal specialization in the education committee and is the substantive vice chair of the elder law section. She'll be joining us around 10:45 to discuss the requirements and deadlines and also appeals regarding how to get certified and stay certified, as she is actually currently at a meeting for the Board of Legal Specialization in Education. The materials that we have that actually Jason drafted, I don't know, Jason, when did you draft those materials?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
2010.
And I updated them in 2020 and updated them for this year because things have really changed since you had those. For instance, how we actually even take the board certification test. And we'll go through that. And so those will be emailed out, I think Emily said, on Monday. Most of the other materials you can find on the Florida Bar website, but we've also included them for your review. So let's go ahead and get started. And let's start with the big question on why should we be board certified? Jason, you've been planning the board certification CLEs for many, many years. So why don't you start?
The board certification for me was, I wanted to get it simply because I thought that would help me career-wise as far as getting clients and getting attention. After going through the process the first time, it quickly became apparent that it would help in all sorts of ways, from being able to identify issues better for areas that I don't practice as often, which has the side benefit of now I see something, I know it's an issue. It's not something I handle, but I refer that off. Now, the more times I'm referring, the more those people are going to remember me and refer stuff back. So it's helped that way. It did make me better at getting through my cases and knowing things in that way. And then it helped me with the judiciary as they saw me as an expert. I noticed almost immediately upon getting board certification that I just got treated a little bit different when I'd go into hearings. I'm not saying that they give preference to it as far as outcomes, but certainly there is a quicker reliance on things that you're saying when it's more of a new concept. Those would be my primary.
Jen, what about you? Why did you decide to become board certified? And yours is pretty recent. So what have you seen since actually getting the results?
A lot more business. A lot of this was, like Jason said, some of it was in marketing. People like to see board certified. In my area, there's not really any elder law board certified attorneys. And there's other board certified attorneys and they market hardcore. And so the residents here know board certification. So they like to hear that. And they like to hear that you're an expert. And also, like Jason said, just being able to learn other practice areas that you typically don't participate in and be able to speak to those. And I really learned a lot through the process. And
yeah, I mean, well, my law partner was basically like, you're gonna work here, you got to be board certified. And so it's great to have, both of the attorneys in the firm are board certified, and it is great marketing. And it's just such a good, it was a good feeling, once you got that email, So, I think a lot of people are here because they're either considering it, but also kind of want to know what the study process is like. So, I have here, we don't all study the same. So will the two of you kind of go through your study experience? How much time did you set aside? How did it work with your family? Kind of give us what you went through, getting up to taking the test.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go
Sure.
ahead.
So initially, I took it the year prior. And I really didn't start studying until probably 3 or 4 weeks prior. And I ended up not passing. And so I decided to do it a little bit differently, because prior I was just doing nights and some weekends. And so when I finally decided that I wanted to do it again, I started much earlier. So I probably started in middle of January, late January. I have 3 kids. And so, and I run a really busy law practice. And so I had to get my team on board and my family on board, my caregivers on board for, who help with the children. And then I really did a lot on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, 12-hour days. And during the week, I would try to get in what I could Monday through Thursday. But I didn't really want it to disrupt my practice or my clients. Some nights I would do it, but at that time, my daughter was still only 2. So it was just a little bit hard. And then leading up to the exam, I took 2 weeks off. And I studied prior to that 2 weeks, I studied in my office Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And then I went to my parents' house. I got out of the office situation, out of my home situation, and studied where there was nobody around for 2 weeks straight, like 10 hours a day.
Now, did you study with anyone, or were you solo, or?
I had a study buddy the year before, Stacy Schwartz, but this year I did both in New York and Florida bars. So I didn't study with anyone then. And so I kind of just did the same thing I did to pass the bars, which for me worked, like outlining and memorization and flashcards. So I was like, I'm just going to do what I know works for me and how I study well. And it usually wasn't with other people. If that makes sense.
Now, did you, Jason, chime in whenever, and those that are attending, go ahead and send questions, and we'll go through them accordingly. But so I've gotten a couple of questions from people that are taking the board cert either a couple years ago or now, and they said, well, do you have outlines? So did you start with someone else's outline? Did you outline on your own? Did you find that as an experience that helped? I mean,
I outlined both silk off. I did that. And then the statutes, like the guardianship, probate, I didn't outline. I just printed it all out. And then I outlined some of the green books, but I outlined a lot. And that helped me, because that's what I did in law school. And that's what I did for the bars, but outlining in flashcards. So yes, I have outlines.
Yeah. What about you, Jason? How was your study experience?
So for me, it was very similar. At the time, my son, I think he was 4. All I remember is he was in that difficult age where I wanted to strangle him. And so I knew going in, the biggest thing that had to be done up front was the buy-in from the family. And obviously my wife being the biggest part of that. But even the extended family, we needed to know, because basically I knew there was going to come times where I just needed them to be gone. Not so much because I studied at the house at the time, but just feeling that pressure that I need to leave the office and get home. And so they took off and left a couple of weekends to go see some other family members and just, do some visits. And that helped out a lot. I started my intense studying right around the time of the old board certification. That's how long ago it was for me. The annual update used to be a board cert course. And I started there, and I had a map all the way up to the exam, and I wrote down every day what I'd be studying, what subject, Medicaid or probate or insurance, whatever the case may be. And then I assigned weekends basically to each of the major areas. I made sure I had a whole weekend on that. I did similar outlines. I I don't believe in looking at other people's outline, other than maybe ask to see one just so they can see how it does. But it's really your preference and how you learn. And if you take somebody else's outline, I don't think you're going to do as well. I'm not a test taker. I'm a horrible test taker. Always have been. So I probably did a lot more overkill than some who were always told they were gifted at test taking. The week of the exam, I took off. I went down to Tampa, got in a hotel room, and just pretty much camped out there and studied up until the exam. Mainly, though, that was not studying new material. It was doing flashcards and practicing outlining for the answers.
Yeah, and I had a very different experience from the two of you. We don't have kids, and I'm married, and but I also was not a solo practitioner. I had my law partner and my husband, and she was very supportive and let me take off Fridays to study a week before. But I did take off almost every weekend for about 2 to 3 months to study. And that was hard because my husband and I, that's the time that we spend together boating and doing the things that we do and so having him on board ish. I don't know if I could have gotten on board twice. But it was super, super important. And actually I tell this, in the grand scheme of things, it's really nothing, but I took it, the board certification in 2020, March of 2020. So I took the board cert. I hadn't been going out. I'm like, we're going out after. It's going to be great. That week, the world shut down. COVID. I was like, what? This is ridiculous. I haven't gone out in two, 3 months. Come on. They're shutting down all the restaurants. But that, and I think that may have been one of the last times that they did it in person. I'm not sure about that, but it was in person at that time.
I went in person the first time, but then because I hand wrote the first, which don't do that.
Okay, and I'm gonna get to this. We have some questions, but let's talk about that. Talk about your experience of handwriting versus computer. And why did you decide to handwrite?
So I hand wrote Florida and New York bars. Okay. And so technology just terrifies me. And so I decided to handwrite. And I think that was definitely to my detriment because I couldn't write fast enough to get in all I wanted to get in. And so then the second time I took it in my office on a computer, and it was so much easier. It really was easy. I mean, it's kind of nerve-wracking because they're watching you. So you feel like if you look up or something, they're going to think you're cheating. But it was so much easier doing it on the computer in my office. It was on handwriting. Well,
Jen, expand on that. So I took it in the room, like the bar, like with the clock in the front, like Hunger Games countdown clock. But explain how they are proctoring it now. And so it's in your own location, correct?
Yeah. So you pick your computer where you're going to do it. And so I did it on my desktop in my office, and you clear everything around you off. And I don't know exactly what they see. I mean, Amy can probably speak to that, but I guess they're watching you, and but I just made sure I was really comfortable, and I made sure nobody was in the office, and we had a sign on the front door and we weren't open. So it was but I liked it because it had 4 different sections. So you would do your section, then you'd have a break. And I don't think they're going to do that again. Amy might mention that, but I was just made sure I was really comfortable, and I had my IT check my computer the day before to make sure everything was good to go.
Yeah, we had a very different experience, Jason, huh?
Yes.
Well,
my big plug was always earplugs, but which might still be if you're in your office and there are other people around. But
well, and I didn't realize other board certifications, they allowed materials. Like I was sitting next to a guy taking tax. I think you were too, Jason, and he had books and books and books. But what did he say to you about if he looks at the material?
Yeah, I said to him, well, that's not fair. You get your materials. He goes, if you see me reach for a book, know that I've decided I'm failing, and I just want to see what the right answer was. It's not going to be time to look. It's just a comfort blanket or something like that.
So one of our attendees said, approximately how many hours do you think you had to put in getting prepared for the board cert?
A lot.
A lot. I mean, if I did Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, probably 10 to 12 hours for
Mhm.
5 or 6 weekends, probably. Look at my calendar. I don't know how, I couldn't really do much during the week. And then the 2 weeks leading up, I studied every day for like 10
Mhm.
hours a day. I mean, I took breaks.
And so did you study the night before the exam?
I did, because that's just how I am. I was working on my memorizing like elements and statutes. I'm memorizing Twyla's nursing home seminar from the Essentials program or annual update. Yeah.
Well, and that's what another question is, what materials did you use to prepare? Now, I will say that the Florida Bar, if you Google Elder Law Board certification, they have a very comprehensive list, and in our materials, a comprehensive list will be there. But there's no way possible that you could go through the comprehensive list that they provided. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about what you used, and I'll actually go get one of mine that I used.
When you go.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. So, in the materials we gave you, it went through all the list of the stuff that we went through. And the biggest tip I could give is, for me at least, was to skip the horn books on subjects that are statutorily driven. So probate, I read the probate statutes and the rules. I stayed with that. Guardianship, I stayed with the rules and focused on that. I reviewed some of the palms, but with that, I guess I did fall back more on the materials. David Littleson's materials are what got me through board cert. I never would have passed if it wasn't for David. So with that one, I did fall back away from just studying the palms. And then with the Medicaid, I did, I read through the program manual as far as assets and income several times and made flashcards from that.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the primary areas, I think. I mean,
I studied, like I said, the Solkoff books, and then I did statutes. Yeah. And then I did a lot of the Essentials program. Emma's materials, Twyla's materials, a lot of that was on there. Emma's Medicaid materials are phenomenal. And I'm trying to think. And yeah, I did a lot of the Essentials program. I bought the what's the other section? The probate estate planning.
Reptile.
I bought their annual update as well, and I listened to that in the car because I have 3 offices. So when I was traveling, I would listen to that update.
When I'd forgotten, I did listen to the board cert in the car over and over.
Yeah, I did. I have a picture on my anniversary trip to Anna Maria of me reading the probate code on the beach. Like, I literally was my reading material. Like, I mean, you have to read the probate code. You have to. We are hosting a board certification CLE on October 13th. And the 3 of the people they just named, and I did not tell them to name them, by the way. Twyla Sketchley will be speaking on guardianship. David Lillison will be speaking on public benefits planning. My law partner, Emma, will be speaking on Medicaid planning. And then Colette Smells will be speaking on legal capacity planning. So literally 3 of the people that they just said whose materials they used will have materials and will be speaking on some of these core topics. And speaking of that, so my experience is in my law practice, I do a lot of Medicaid. I've been doing it since I started with Emma. So I didn't study as hard the Medicaid because I was doing that on a daily basis. I studied what I didn't know, right? I honed in on guardianship and probate and trust administration because that was my unknowns. So why don't you guys go into when you did study, did you pick and choose the core topics, or did you allocate the same amount of time to every core topic? And do you want to kind of tell everyone, how much did you put on the non-core topics? Jason.
Okay, I want me to. All right. The core topics got a weekend, like I said before, they were a major focus. The non-core topics, I typically did more in the weekday studying after work or either early in the morning, which wasn't a lot because I was sort of like Jennifer. My practice is me, and so it was very busy. I didn't have a lot of time during the day, but I did try to carve out a little bit. So I focused on those smaller topics. Now, as opposed to Danielle, even though I was doing a lot of Medicaid and VA back at that time, I still gave it a good bit because I wanted to reinforce areas that I didn't normally go into as much, like promissory notes that I wasn't doing a lot of. Because when you're answering the questions, they're going to expect you to give every option, not just cherry pick what the best options are. When you're doing the long essays, you're going to need to give everything. And so I needed to sort of drill that down in my head to make sure I had it, everything down. So I did it all. But like I said before, I'm OCD with test taking because I know it's not my strength.
How did I do it? I sent you a picture if you're able to, like, of what my study materials look like. I don't know if you got that, but I made outlines the first couple of weeks, did the statutes, and then I timed myself for each topic. So I knew leading up to the exam what my days would look like and what I could cover over and over again. So I pretty much did all topics at the same amount of time, whatever I could get in. But I think for me, just timing in and knowing what my days were going to look like I'm going to do guardianship, probate, and Medicaid because I have enough time to cover that today based on what I had timed myself previously to read through it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then when I was outside playing with my kids, I would walk, they're outside riding their bikes or whatever. I would just do memorization. I'd go through elements and things like that.
Well, and it's important to note, especially since we continue to practice, that the exam is off of the laws as of 12/31 of the year prior to what you're taking it. So I knew this, but I still studied the Secure Act, and it had just come out. And I remember the day before the exam, I'm talking with my study buddy. Oh, let me talk. I did study with individuals. I had a lovely human being that is in my same town taking the exam as well. Dana is her name. She's fantastic. And she was super helpful to me in keeping me on track. So I did study with a partner and I found that it was very helpful, but we only studied together once or twice a week. It wasn't every time. Weekends we studied apart. And she told me, why did you study the Secure Act? And I was like, the law. She's like, yeah, it's not on this test. But I still threw it in, Hey, I know the law from 2019, but I also, guess what? It changed. Kind of throwing it in, see what I have, put it all in. And even like Jason said, I had an exam question on Medicaid, and there was a planning technique I would 100% never utilize with a married couple. Still said it. It's still a planning technique, but I said, but I wouldn't use it for the tax implications because there's better planning techniques because there's so many other ways to handle this, but I still threw it in. Is that kind of how you handled the questions as well?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, everything. I could think, not just one way of planning, but everything. We could go this route, we could do this route, whatever I could get in the time allotted.
And someone said, are there written, is it all written, or are there multiple choice questions? Do one of you want to handle that?
There's I think I don't know if Jason, yours was different. I had 3 long essays, 7 short essays, and 40 multiple choice.
That sounds about the same.
And did you find that the long essays were more on the core subjects and then the short on the non-core?
Yes, for me.
With mine, they had the, one of the long essays, there was a couple of little tangents in there that were on some of the non-core areas that I think they were trying to give you an opportunity to grab a point or two if you identified it. But no, they're mainly on those core areas, which is the biggest study tip is, what the big areas of our section are that differentiate us from other sections. That's going to be the long essays.
Mm.
You're not going to have a long essay dealing with long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance will be on the test, but it's more than likely going to be a multiple choice or a short essay.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the long essays, they give you the fact pattern and then they give you like 3 or 4 direct kind of questions that for me, that's what it was, like where I had like a probate one and they were like, tell me what materials you would have the client bring in type of thing. So it's broken up a little bit.
Yeah, and Amy, before she gets on, I want to say this because I looked at who was on the board certification committee, who writes the test. This is just a technique that I did, and I said Amy Fanthwell is on the board certification committee. That's when I was taking it, and I was like, she is the queen of decanting. So there's gonna be a decanting question, and sure enough, last question, decanting, which I think I wrote on my exam. Actually, I know I wrote it. My last sentence was, it is perfect that decanting was my last question because now I need to go drink wine. So I in the materials that'll be sent out on Monday, I printed out who's on the committee and put it in the materials to look at. I'm not saying it's a foolproof way to say what's got to be a long question or the long essay, but I found that it was helpful.
All right, attendees, what you need to know is the reason she wanted to get that in before Amy got on is because Amy would say, that's foolish, don't do that.
That's
Because
correct.
they don't
She actually
always
told me
test
that.
based on their subjects.
Yeah, I wanted to get that on because she already told me that is foolish. And I was like, it worked.
Stalker.
One of the questions is the seminar that I mentioned, the board certification CLE, going to be online? And yeah, it's going to be held via Zoom. And I'm working with our section administrator, you'll see her on here, Emily, to get that through the big bar now. So I think it'll be super helpful. And not only if you're thinking of if you're taking it this year, which one of my best friends in the section is taking it this year, but also if you're considering taking it or if you're new in elder law, because it's really some core topics in elder law. And one of the other questions is, okay, so if you're just now considering getting board certification, board certified, where do you begin? Where would you begin if you're just now considering it?
This boot camp, I think you already have. That's where it started for me. Was I attended the certification review course to see what was there, and then took it from there to the application to see if I met all the criteria standards as far as the practice experience, the number of cases, all of that, to make sure that I would be able to be qualified for it. And then from there, I just started looking at the core, non-core areas and mapping out how I would go about it as far as a study pattern, and talking with other people, going to the CLEs the section puts on or a fellow puts on, and talking to other people there and trying to get an idea, because oftentimes you might find out there is somebody studying for it and you can buddy up with them. If you're that type of person, I think it's a good idea. I didn't have a buddy, by the way, for the exam. Didn't know anybody else taking it to buddy up with. And I think it is a good idea, sort of like Danielle was saying, where you have somebody here and there you can touch base with and compare study habits and find out what's working, what's not for them.
Yeah. I didn't do a boot camp or anything like that. I think I just had talked to my mentors about, if it was something I should consider. And then from there, yeah, just like submitted the application and went through that process to see. what that would look like, and then start, the second time around, and then started mapping out studying and things like that.
And I want to get to that, but I'll tell you, my law partner gave me advice, which I did not take. Which is, she took the Florida Board Cert and the CLE exam at the same time. So CLE is National Elder Law Foundation Certified Elder Law Attorney. Basically, my understanding is that it's more national as opposed to just statewide. And she said, if you're even considering doing the CLE exam, do it all at the same time. And now I was like, that's too much. I'm not doing it. Sorry, you're an overachiever, Emma, but board certified in Florida is good enough for me. So you guys both mentioned, and you guys said that I could share that you both took the exam twice. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so explain that experience to me, and to us, and why, how it felt with the first, how did you change your study habits, and then what made you decide to take it again? You can go, Jen.
Okay. I'll go. Well, the first time leading up to the exam, I just didn't have a lot of time, like I had said before. And so for me, I was just like, I'm just going to go, I'm going to try. I want to see the format. If I pass, that's amazing. If I don't, I'm not going to it's not going to be the end of the world for me. And so, then when I did end up failing, I pretty much immediately decided right away that I was going to do it again, but I knew I needed to study earlier. And I kind of thought about what was on the previous exam and maybe what could be on the next exam. Like I do things like that, but, and so obviously I started studying a lot earlier and put a lot more time into it than I had. Because I remember talking to other colleagues that had taken it and failed, and their whole thing was, I do elder law, I practice elder law, so why do I need to study? And so maybe that was my mentality going into, but you have to study. You have to put it in.
And everyone is different. Amy would kill me for sharing this too, but I know that there's one individual, I'm not going to say his name, Andrew Boyer, who did not study, and he passed the first time. And I remember hearing that before taking the board cert, and I was like, that is so frustrating to me. I'm so frustrated by it. Still to this day, but that's not everyone's experience.
Okay.
I wouldn't suggest it highly. Do not recommend.
Back when I was taking it, it almost seemed like a rite of passage to take it and fail it. Enrique Zamora, he's a law professor teaching elder law, was the guy that was constantly getting put up at the time to talk about board cert, and he talked about how he failed it, and I'm like, great, a law professor can't even pass this test. But it's not true for everybody. Obviously, there are people like Danielle and Steve and all these people, they passed the first time around. So it's not automatic, but I think you do learn a lot from it. If I'd failed it and didn't take it, I still would have gained from it. I was sort of like Jennifer, it became sort of a bone of contention when I didn't pass the first time. I was determined to go back, but I did really look at what I did. If you fail it, you're allowed to go to Tallahassee and review your exam, which you need to do, because the benefit there isn't so much seeing how sloppy your writing is seeing what the ideal answer is. Because once I was able to see what they wanted next to mine, and I calmed down a little bit, then I was able to go at the exam with writing in a different way. Not so much conversational as just get to the point, hit every single point, as many facts as you can get, and because it looked like they're just checking boxes to see if you're hitting everything.
Yeah, and for the review, you can now do it. You don't have to go to Tallahassee. You can do it online. But I didn't do the review. I should have. Well, I'm good now, but I guess.
And apparently it's worth it. I'm not gonna say who it was, but one of my favorite elder law litigators, she was telling me a couple weeks ago that she failed it, and sure as heck went up and fought it and won. And if you would know who it is, you would 100% see that out of her.
I know.
Hey, Vicky. So for everyone, Vicky is the current chair of the elder law section. We're so glad that you could join. We've been going through test taking tips. Amy's going to join us in a little bit to go over, how to apply and how to get certified and then stay board certified. But give us a little bit about your experience. Why did you decide to take it? How was your study habits, and what was your experience with the test?
Yeah, well, hey everybody. Thank you to the participants for joining us today, and especially thank you to Jennifer, Danielle, Jason, Amy, who will join us, and our administrator, Emily Young. But thank you all for taking the time today to be here to help our boot campers. So my experience, well, I was working with Lachlan Waldock, one of our kind of premier elder law attorneys, the first one in Tallahassee in North Florida, where I am. And she, of course, we were very involved in NALA, we were very involved in the bar. And she said, yeah, as soon as you get your 5 years in, you need to sit, you need to take the exam, become board certified. Of course, I was really looking forward to another exam. I'd already done the Florida bar. I'd also taken the Georgia bar exam, passed that. So yeah, I was ready to go, but that was the last exam. And I keep saying I will never, ever, ever take another exam, although every time I've ever said no, somehow I've ended up doing it. So for the Florida, now when we took it, Twyla Sketchley and I took it together. She's also a Tallahassee practitioner. And it was interesting because back then we had to go to Orlando to a hotel. I know they're doing it virtually now, I think at least for the time being. But we had to go to we had to bring our own laptop, and the laptop had to have the security, software on there so you couldn't cheat and all that good stuff. But you had the option of either writing out your answers, you do the bubble, or writing out your answers on the little blue book, or you could type. So Twyla chose to write it out. And I thought, there is no way on God's green earth I will ever sit there with a pencil and try to write out my exam. Not doing that. So I brought my computer, but people were freaking out because they thought, well, what if my computer locks up, or the software, or this or that or the other thing? But I'm here to tell you that I maxed out the keyboard on that computer, and I typed so fast. And I remember there was a big guardianship question. Lucky for me, because I was practicing a lot of guardianship, and I was like, oh yeah, I got this. And I just hammered on those keys, and I just knowledge dump every single thing I could think of. Sorry, the dog's in the background. So that was interesting. But Twyla and I did a lot of studying together. And one of the things, hopefully this is not too redundant, but one of the things we did, literally, we would have time that we would get together. We would go through all the statutes, all the applicable. We would just, the little, what we call the, like the elder law Bible. We would go through 765, 744, 709, or whatever the preceding statutes, or the trust code. We went through the VA guardianships, which you hardly ever touch. We went through what's a conservatorship in Florida, which doesn't have anything to do with guardianship. It's for people who are missing, dead, kind of, or not dead, right, but missing. You need to start this kind of nuanced procedure. So we went through all of that. We went through all the DCF, all the Medicaid regs. So boring. Sorry for the dog here.
I left mine at home.
Dog wants to get up on the couch. And she's arthritic, so she can't do herself. So even though that's super boring, it was amazing how much we taught ourselves. Because when you think about it, like the foundations, the regs, the statutes, just kind of the basic stuff, like you have to know that, and you will find questions that are going to ask you. You don't necessarily have to get the 5.030 of the probate rules. You don't have to be that precise, but for you to know that, hey, I know that in probate I can engage in discovery right away. I don't have to have an adversary procedure, or to say we can't do certain things because we don't have an adversary procedure. So in this particular essay, you know, it's that core knowledge. So you really do have to spend some time getting to know, because I did mostly guardianship and probate and litigation. Was not really doing as much Medicaid. And so I had to really kind of spend extra time on that. I would also counsel people to talk to your peers, talk to other people that you know, or, you know, have particular knowledge in the subject area, mentors. You know, we've got a bunch of mentors in the elder law section. So tap into that knowledge base, you know, tap into people like your presenters here who have been there, done that on the testing, and they'll give you tips, you know, do this, don't do that. You're not expected to get 100%. You're not going to get 100%. So focus on the core areas. There's a practice test online. You guys probably already talked about this, right?
No, I haven't. Yeah, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, and then the core, you know, it tells you exactly online what the core areas are that you're going to be tested on, and they're not trick questions. So the test is not designed to be tricky. That's not at all the point. The point is to test your core knowledge. So with that focus, I would say just put the time in and be confident and just go for it, you know, and we're so proud of all of you for attempting it. And we really look forward to more board certified lawyers. And by the way, Jennifer, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, I'm so glad you made it in. You did well.
Yeah, she got to attend the pinning, and she probably was the best dressed at the pinning. I mean, I don't know if you're friends with her on Facebook, but her picture, I mean, she is adorable. Those pink shoes, I just loved it.
Thank you.
Yeah, her husband was so proud.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because you mentioned that one person that went to Tallahassee and fought it. And she told me, and then I mentioned that to my husband, and he was like, that's not a backup. That's not an option.
Yeah.
Study.
Yeah, right. It's good to know, but you want to kind of hopefully never have to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the members of the that actually helped write the test, what they explained to me is I was very confused by the core versus non-core and some of the non-core topics. And basically what he said to me is it's what a walking around knowledge that an elder law attorney should have. For instance, there was a residence rights question on my test. Like, I don't know. I would give advice on residence rights, and ombudsman, hello. I just remember not knowing the answer at all, but knowing that I didn't know the answer. But these are the people that probably would know the answer. And so it's kind of walking around knowledge. Now, I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if anyone else does, but one of the questions is any idea of the passage rate on the elder law board certification. Vicky, do you know that?
Yeah, it's I mean, I can take a stab at it. I would say probably like 25%, something in that range, maybe. We don't have that many people. We don't, you know, our section is not, let's just say, as large as like Reptile, which is 10,000. We have about 1,600 members in our section. And so any given test, you know, it may be like 10 to 12 people that take the test, and usually it's somewhere around 4 out of 12, 4 out of 15, 4 to 5 out of 15. So that's generally been a pretty fair number. So what is that? 20, 25%. So it's not 50%. We'd like to see, you know, higher passage rates, but again, I don't know how much time people commit to, you know, is it the people that are like, I'm just going to wing it and take it and not study, and then they don't pass and they come back next time? See, we don't know. So we have no idea, you know, when we're on the certification committee and you're creating the exams and then grading the exams, you don't know if it's all anonymous, just some number. So we have no idea if people take it repeatedly. So you know, I don't know that the passage or non-passage rates really quantify anything in particular, but it's not like 80%. It's not like the bar exam where you know, the law schools like test to, you know, teach to the test, so to speak. It's like, you know, they want an 80% passage rate or something. So but anyway, but I encourage more people to take the exam and also really do prepare. I mean, this is very serious. And once you're certified, then there's the continuing certification. You don't have to take an exam again, of course, but you do have to be peer reviewed every 5 years. You still have to be in good standing with the bar. You know, you can't have any major offenses. I would say no offenses with the bar, hopefully, but you know, sometimes there are things that happen. But you have to keep your record clean, and you also have to disclose anything that happens during that 5-year period. You have to voluntarily disclose that to the certification committee, the certification review people, to make sure that you are still in good standing for certification. It's a very high level of esteem, and it should be that way, because when you say I'm board certified, that means something. It has a lot of backing behind it, something to be very proud of.
I'd like to jump on this question also about the percentage rate, because as I've followed it for a long time, it varies widely, because like Vicki was saying, some years there'll only be 3 people that take it. So if one person fails, well, it's going to look really bad, right? Yeah. It just doesn't take much to get that percentage number down. So I've seen it as low as 12%. I've seen it above 50%. And a lot of times it just goes by the number. So don't let that sway you from whether or not you can take it or not. Because, and just in fairness, I think I asked that exact question back when I was thinking about taking it. I think it's a fair question to ask. I wouldn't put a whole lot of weight on whether or not that's going to be a decision maker.
Yeah, good point.
Do we know how many elder law board certified lawyers we have in the state of Florida? I mean,
117.
Yes, we have like, go ahead, Jennifer. Sorry, did you check?
Yeah, 117.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna say 113, but maybe since the 3 of you just, yeah, came on board a little bit more, yeah.
and it's such a small number for all the elder law attorneys, and even in our section. It's funny. I'm in Brandon. It's not a big town, and 4 of those board certified lawyers are in Brandon, within a mile of each other, which I think is wild to me. I'm gonna share a picture. I'm gonna show you the website, and then I'm gonna share a picture of Jen. What her study. Look at this. Look at how organized that girl was.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, and everything you see, like I write timing on it. So that's what I studied.
Yeah. So and that's what it looked like on I had my whole dining room table. It was study zone.
Look at what's up top there, you guys, in the top left corner. Those are index cards.
Yeah.
Those are great. No, those kill. I love index card prep. I love that. And it's great to quiz each other. And you know, another thing Twyla and I did is we prepared, especially for the essays, we actually prepared mock essays for each other, some short, some long. Just, you know, kind of brainstorm some goofy stuff. And I think it was, and then we would time each other and say, okay, you've got 30 minutes to write an answer or whatever. I thought it was helpful just to go through that process and be under kind of a time, you know, kind of a nervous time deadline.
Yeah, and I just don't think that I've ever been as smart as I was the day after I took that exam. And the fortunate and unfortunate part about studying is realizing how much you did not know. Like long-term care insurance partnership agreements. I'm like, what are these? First of all, do they really exist? Have you ever actually seen one? But I'm like, why did I not know that these existed?
I was in a probate, like a litigation, which I'm still in, unfortunately. And I was reading the probate code, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, I'm right. Like, there was just so much. It's amazing.
Danielle, are you checking the Q&A because there's a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I didn't know if you're checking.
While she's reading that, I tell you, the insurance one was the one that got me. I would just call the insurance agent I work with to answer that question, because I've never seen a partnership program. It shouldn't be on this test. I knew that I was not going to get it right, so I figured I'd give them a chuckle.
So remember, for the test takers out there, to concentrate on and I wish we had the rubric right in front of us, but concentrate on, let's say, the top 5, like the core issues. I'm not saying don't look at the others, and you should put time in on the others, but like the insurance or the housing, those are important. Those are things that we have to know about in our practices. But if you only have a certain amount of time and a certain bandwidth for this, focus on those core substantive areas, because those are going to be where the essay content is going to come from. You're probably going to get like insurance and housing will probably come in on the multiple choice. It could be short essay. And the long essay, they might be a component of it, but it's not going to be the crux. You're not going to have to know A to Z on long-term care insurance in order to pass this exam.
So I brought this up and we'll go through it, but this is probably a really good question for you, Vicki, because you did serve on the board certification committee, correct? And
Yep.
do you do a certain term? Is that a couple of years or?
It was like 4 or 5 years, I think. And I was chair during my term, and you can come back on too. There have been board certified attorneys that have come back on, like Chris Likens. I think Alex Coelho might be back on. So yeah, so Amy Fanslaw and I served together on the committee. Ed Boyer, Chris Likens came back on, Travis Bencham, some others. So yeah, so it's a really good group. But you're talk about being smart, Danielle. Like, that's the smartest I ever was, is when I actually had to prepare questions and then grade them and scrutinize and go, wow, what, this is a great response. I mean, this is something different, and have to pass it to my Medicaid, experts on the committee and go, hey, you experts, you need to look at this. This is the right answer, right? So it's very interesting. Yeah.
And so you're perfect to answer this question. Is there a specific format the committee is looking for in an essay response? For example, are we to answer as if we were advising a client?
Well, I think it depends on the nature of the question. There may be questions that are framed that way. John Smith comes in to see you and has this problem. Obviously, like with any problem that you have, you need to issue spot, you need to outline. I mean, again, you have time constraints, so this has to be done pretty quickly. You have to figure out what the issues are, figure out what's actually germane, because there are some things that might be in there, and you really should not get hyper focused on one thing, because what's going to happen is, if you like an essay has an exploitation question, but it also has guardianship, and maybe even it may be exploitation for the purpose of Medicaid planning. I'm going to take all mom's money so I can qualify her for Medicaid. So you got to really understand what the core is here and be able to digest it quickly, and don't get hyper focused on one area. Ooh, I'm going to tell them everything I know about exploitation. Yeah, but if you miss the other components that are in that, especially long essays, you're not going to pass that question, because you're taking too much time on one isolated piece of that. So you need to be able to develop the answer for all of the core components, and do not get distracted by some, potentially red herring that's really not the core aspect of the question.
Right. So Jason, how did you kind of structure? Did you outline your long essays beforehand, or you just start the typing? How did you guys handle it?
Like I said, mine, I felt were kind of broken up already, the question.
Oh, okay.
And so, I'd read the question, I just go. I mean, I'm not a planner like that for tests. So I just kind of went with it. So.
I've never been a planner like that, but I became one. I had a definite patent answer ready to go for Medicaid. That I was going to go at it, if it was a spin down question based on if it's a husband and wife, or if it's a single individual. I had an approach that was going to force me to stay on my outline and not get off on some tangent about talking about a client. And like I said before, conversational just doesn't need to be there. It needs to be on the actual legal issue spotting and what the rule is, and how it's going to be applied to this fact pattern, and just work your way through it, and make sure you hit every one. And as you're reading it, just, if you're that type of person that needs to put issue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because there's going to be a bunch on a long essay. That's why it's called a long essay. But I did have a standard answer for several of the major core areas.
That's a great plan, though. I like that idea, Jason, that you kind of already establish kind of some, set memory and kind of focal points for you, so that can take some nervousness away too, right? Because I mean, when I've done well at comprehensive tests. It's been fine. But I know when I first sit down for the test, I have a little freak out moment. And you get to that first question, you're all in anticipation, and then all of a sudden my brain just like starts to go on a holiday, and I'm like, snap out of it. You've only got so much time, and then I'm good. But it's just like, it's really hard when you're taking a timed test and you think you're supposed to know everything, and of course you're not supposed to know everything. But having that kind of preset, like taking some of the jitters away, Jason, maybe that was a good plan. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and I actually, especially the Medicaid question, I did answer it like I was talking to a client. And the reason I did that is because when I'm going into a ICP, home and community-based services, Medicaid, I'm going through all the planning techniques, okay? Even if they're not the right tool for this vehicle purchase, income producing property, PSK, promissory note, pool, I'm going through all of them and I'm saying, here's your options. These are the ones I think are better for your situation.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, a married couple, in very little circumstances, would a personal service contract be the best planning tool? But in my essay, I said, it's a planning tool. Don't do it. Income tax issues,
Selling the
CSCPA.
homestead.
So I kind of did, because when you're talking to a client, you're giving them all their options, right? And so I kind of did structure it that way. And that kind of pulls in what Jason said is I already had, it's a Medicaid question. Here are all the planning tools. Okay, so then I'm going to list all my planning tools and I'm going to go in and fill in the pros and cons of the planning tools and how it fits with the factual situation. And it does take away some of the jitters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Amy is logging in now. It ran over. There she is. And while she gets into the Zoom, she's going to go over the requirements to apply, her tips on the application and the appeal process. You can go online and find a lot of the information we are providing in the materials, the initial application, sample questions, study guide. I will say, during the application process, I pulled this from the website and it changed mid through my study process. So make sure you're keeping up to date on which one is the current one. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Amy. Thank you for joining. I know you're taking time out of your meeting. But I think everyone really wants to know more of the requirements on applying and what your tips are for that.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm Amy Fanslaw. Sorry to be joining a little bit late. As Danielle kind of alluded, I'm coming from from a BLSC meeting, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the technical requirements for applying for certification. Let me just give you a brief little background about who I am and what BLSC is and how that fits into the entire scheme. So I'm board certified in both wills, trusts, and estates and in elder law. I served previously on the elder law certification committee for 6 years. I'm a prior chair of that committee. And now I serve on the BLSC, which is the Board of Legal Specialization and Education. And that is a committee that reports, it's a big bar committee, reports directly to the Board of Governors. And it has authority over all the different certification areas in the committees. The BLSC helps us establish the standards for certification. We sit as the appellate body for people who apply for certification and are denied for whatever reason, whether it's peer review, application process, the examination, what have you. And also for recertification, we sit as the appellate body for that as well. We establish the policies for the qualifications of the applicants, including the exam and then the non-exam qualifications. And we oversee the CLE requirements and the course accreditation in general. So, and this probably, forgive me if this is a repeat, but the requirements for the elder law certification, there's some minimum requirements. You've probably been talking about the exam and how to study and tips for all of that. That's fabulous information. I'm sure a lot of great tips were given, but there's also the whole other part of it, the application process itself. So at a minimum, to be minimally qualified to sit for certification, you have to be practicing at least 5 years. Now, most people who take in elder law, most of the people who take the certification exam have been practicing for longer than that. So that's a minimum standard. You also need to have 40% of your practice in the 3 years preceding your application needs to be concentrated in elder law. So you don't need to do elder law day in and day out, but you have to have at least 40% of your practice be reflected in the elder law area. And then you need to have 60 hours of CLE requirements. Those are CLEs that are specifically approved for elder law certification credits. So they're going to be your advanced courses, your intermediate and advanced courses that are specifically approved for elder law certification credits. And then favorable peer review. And there's a lot of mystery about the peer review. They're confidential reviews from the peers, from other people in your geographical area, maybe throughout the state, judges that maybe you've appeared in front of. But all of those factors are established by the written application that you submit for certification. And applications are always due on August 31st for the following year's examination. So if you're planning on taking the exam in 2024, your application should have already been submitted. So I got some tips for the applications if y'all would like to hear that. Would that be good, Danielle?
Yeah, we haven't touched on it.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Okay. So, you know, some of those different requirements, like the substantial involvement, what that's really going to have you do is quantify the number of cases that you've handled in different areas, whether it be like I've done this many estate planning sort of files, I've handled this many VA applications, this many Medicaid applications, that sort of thing. That can be kind of daunting when you're just sitting down looking at a multi-page application to kind of rack your brain about, well, heck, how many have I actually done, or what's a fair number of that? So if you know you're going to be applying for certification, it's a good idea maybe to kind of keep track of that over a little bit of time to make sure you've got an accurate number for that. It helps the certification committee kind of put your application in context. It's also real helpful to kind of keep track of all your involvement in elder law activities, whether you're involved in a fellow, whether you're involved in the local bar with an elder law committee, or maybe it's more wills, trusts, and estates generally, whatever it is, involved in the elder law section. But itemizing all of that really is helpful for the committee to make sure that that you're meeting that substantial involvement requirement. Peer review, I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. Like I said, it's confidential. What you'll be doing is you'll be asking 5 of your peers, the application's going to ask you to give names of 5 people to kind of talk about you, to kind of see what their thoughts are on, are you professional? What's your knowledge base? Do you think this person ought to be board certified? Those are the sorts of questions that peer review, those questionnaires are designed to elicit. Something that I think is a good idea, if you're going to ask somebody for a recommendation or put somebody's name down, you kind of want to make sure they're going to give you a positive review. Sometimes it's nice to have the heads up, and you can get a feel for someone if you say, hey, I'm thinking about using you for a peer review for certification. Would you be willing to do that for me? And that does a couple things there. Number one, what it does is it makes sure that it's top of mind for them. So when that peer review form comes through in the mail, they don't just ignore it and put it aside. We're all busy, and sometimes some of those things fall by the wayside. You want to make sure that the people that you're saying, hey, these people will vouch for me, that they actually follow through and do it. Because what happens if you don't get a sufficient number of reviews coming back, then the bar has to go back out and ask other people who you may not know to do reviews for you. And what the certification committee is looking for is, are you not necessarily, it's not a popularity contest, you know, are you well known in the area, but are you well respected? Do you have a good reputation in the community? Some of those more intangible things are real important for peer review. Obviously, bad reviews aren't great, especially if it's someone who you thought was going to vouch for you, so select carefully. No reviews aren't great either, because then that may indicate that, you know, you don't necessarily have much of a reputation. We can't interpret, or the certification committee can't interpret why a review didn't come back. It may be someone didn't want to give a bad review, so they just chose to ignore it. We can't read into that. We don't know whether, you know, maybe the reviewer didn't know the person sufficiently enough. There's no way of knowing. So what you're looking for are people who are going to kind of vouch for you and your reputation and your smarts and your professionalism. And then secondary references are often also, even if all the primary references come back, and by primary, I mean all the people who you put down on your application, even though those all come back, they were going to ask those people, hey, do you have other people? Give me the names of 3 people who might also know this person. Those are called secondary references. And that way, there's a little bit more, I guess, credibility in some of those as well. We know we're not just putting our best friends down to give us great references. It gives the committee a little bit broader scope, a little bit broader efficient net. Something that was a big concern for me when I applied, because I applied eons ago, and I wasn't involved in the section. I came to work, put my head down. I was grinding out cases left and right. I didn't know a whole lot of people except people locally. And I was real concerned that someone might get my peer review, request, and they wouldn't know who I was, so they wouldn't answer it. So, or that the certification committee wouldn't necessarily be able to place who I am. And so what is helpful to help combat that is to include a photograph with your application. There's a place on the application to do that. It just helps put a name to the face for the certification committee. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of times when we're reviewing these applications, we may not place the name, but you see that person, you're like, yeah, I've seen that person with the UN program. I know who that is. That person asks a lot of really smart questions. Or, I've seen that person, at such and such CLE for the section, whatever it is. It's a whole lot easier than it just makes it easier for your application to go through a little bit more smoothly. Would you like me to talk about some of the technical requirements of the exam? Would that be helpful?
I have one question.
Sure.
So from an attendee, it says, can we supplement our responses if we do not qualify in the initial application? I think I had talked to you, Amy, I don't know if it was this week or last week, and I basically said, are there people that don't qualify in the initial application? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. So what does that look like if you don't qualify? Do you have to reapply?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's going to depend upon the reason why you don't apply. So for some issues, if it is, let's say it's no one returns their peer review request, what the Florida Bar staff member will reach out to the applicant and say, hey, we need some more names. We're not getting any secondary references. We're not getting any responses. Give us some more names of people. So they do kind of give you another bite at the apple. If it's an issue of, and sometimes this happens because there's a whole bunch of questions on the application that ask, do you have any pending malpractice cases? Have you ever been commented on adversely by a judge in a written opinion, or a court order? And you need to read those questions very, very carefully and answer truthfully. Do not just go through and initial them, because answering, I'm kind of taking a bunny trail here, but it's the top of mind. Answering those questions inaccurately is automatic grounds for denial. So please read those questions. It's not the end of the world to have a bar complaint against you. The best lawyers do. So don't be worried about disclosing something that you think may not be favorable. The most important thing is to disclose it. But I will say, if you do have a pending bar action or bar complaint against you, a lot of times the area committees, and it's in their discretion whether or not they do this, so I can't say it happens all the time, but the area committee may defer any decision about certification until that is resolved. It kind of depends upon the status of the application and where we are in the process. But to answer your question, Danielle, oftentimes, yeah, if the initial application looks like it's deficient in one or more of those areas, then you're given an opportunity to go back and supplement the application.
Okay, yeah, I think that answered the follow-up question, which was if they had already applied, could they send in supplemental information to kind of expand? But what I'm hearing from you is, I think that it would be considered with the application.
Generally, yes. And in fact, you do have, this kind of goes back to the issue about bar complaints and malpractice actions. Remember that you have a continuing duty to notify the bar of those things. So if after you submit your application for certification or even recertification and you find out, then you get a bar complaint a week later. You have to supplement your application. There's no exemption to that. There's no excuse for not doing that. So don't think that you can just kind of ignore it and the bar won't know. They will know, and then it actually becomes a much bigger issue.
Now, do you have to have malpractice insurance to take and be board certified?
No, not at all.
I didn't know that.
No, and yeah, and there is kind of I think it's a misconception. I don't have any empirical evidence on what I'm about to say, so just take it with a grain of salt. But I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, I don't want to get board certified because my malpractice insurance is going to go up higher. They're going to expect more of me. Well, it's not a great, I don't think that that's reality. There are a lot of malpractice carriers that actually give you a discount for being board certified because you are a better attorney overall. So, or you should be. It's an objective standard then that has been met, and a lot of the carriers will give you discounts. But it's not necessary. You don't have to carry malpractice insurance for it.
Perfect. Well, could you go over, we had talked about the appeal process, and I was telling them one of my favorite elder law section litigators went up to Tallahassee and appealed hers and won. Of course she did. You know what I'm talking about. Can you go through the appeals process for us?
Appeal on an original certification application or recertification?
No, I meant on the exam. I apologize.
Oh, okay. So that would be on the original certification application, then, yeah. So because then that's just one of many components. So you could, what happened, just to kind of put it in context, you apply to become board certified, and if you meet all those other requirements, so the substantial involvement, the peer review, the 5 years practice, all of that, then you're allowed to sit for the exam, and the exam then is going to be the last component of being certified. So if any one of those prongs is deficient and you're denied certification, then you have an opportunity to appeal. And your first line of appeal goes to the certification committee, and the certification committee considers it de novo. They're going to reconsider. They'll go back and they'll make an attempt to, if it's an exam question or exam issue in particular, the exam is reviewed by the committee to see if they'll in essence regrade it to see if there's any way to kind of push you over the hump is what we say. There's a minimum, it's a 70% passage rate, not scored on a bell curve or anything. It's a 70% passage rate. And if there's any mistakes in the original grading of the exam, then that'll be fleshed out in the regrading of it at the certification committee level. From there, if the certification committee doesn't see errors enough to where you would pass, then it goes to what's called a grade appeal review. And that goes up to the BLSC level. And that's a 3-person panel. They're not BLSC members. It is chaired by a BLSC member. But it's 3 board certified elder law attorneys who are selected at random. They're not certification committee members, but they are board certified in the state of Florida. And then they go and they regrade the exam to see if there's errors in the grading sufficient to where then the person would be able to pass. And if the grade review panel, if they can't find enough to make you pass, if you do pass, then from there, congratulations, you're board certified. That in essence overrules the certification committee. But if the grade review panel doesn't find sufficient errors to then have the examinee pass, then it goes to the BLSE level to consider that as well. And from there, it goes to the Board of Governors, and then from the Board of Governors, ultimately to the Florida Supreme Court. Usually it doesn't go that far though.
Right.
For whatever reason, either because it's, it's successful at a lower level, or the applicant's just like, okay, that's enough.
Well, and then, I was talking to one of my colleagues yesterday who, has now been board certified for 5 years, and she's coming up to the reapplication process.
Mm-hmm.
And can you kind of give us a little bit about what that process is? Because she's like, I didn't realize that it's kind of like reapplying without the exam component.
Exactly what it is. It's not a one and done. So certification is good for 5 years, unless you do something really bad to make it go away before then. But for most people, good for 5 years. And then you, as Danielle said, you have to reapply to stay certified. So you're going to fill out a very similar application to what you completed at the initial certification application. So what I would say you do is make sure you keep good connections for that peer review, because you're still going to need them. Stay involved in section activities, stay involved in SL activities, because you're going to want to build your resume that way. That helps on your application, and kind of keep track of it as you go. Be visible at CLEs. That's very helpful too. A lot of times in our practices, especially if you do a lot of Medicaid applications and maybe not a lot else, you're not in court a lot. You're not seeing people down at the courthouse. You're not seeing people in hearings. You're not getting necessarily that exposure. So it's helpful to continue to be visible at however you can, and keep track of the cases, the types of cases that you handle. What I do for the recertifications, because I've got 2 that I have to do, kind of a pain, but I do them over the 5 years, because I'm not going to sit there at the end, when I've got a month to fill it out and rack my brain to figure out what I did in the previous 5 years. There's no way I can remember that. So I kind of keep track as I go of the types of cases that I handle and those sorts of things. And that's real helpful. That makes that burden a little bit lighter.
Perfect. Yeah. And I know for at least, our CLE committee makes sure that we, when we apply for CLE credit for ours, that we check the box that we want it for both wills, trust, and estates, and elder law. And I'm pretty sure Reptile is also doing that as well. So most of our courses will apply to both wills, trust, and estates, and elder law. And how many, Amy, is there 8 that are dual board certified in wills, trust, and estates, and elder law? Do you know how many there are? No.
At one time there were 8, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's under 15 still, but I'm not sure.
Now, that's a question I have for you. Did you take, how far apart did you take them? Did you take them in the same year? I mean,
I almost wish I would have taken them in the same year, if for no other reason than the recertification process. I took them back-to-back years. I took it in 2007, and then I took it in 2007, 2008, or 2008, 2009. And I did that deliberately because there was overlap. So it made the studying process a little bit easier. And for, I didn't know what I was heading into with my first exam, so I wasn't going to necessarily, bite off 2 in the same year. That just seemed a little insurmountable to me. But I do know somebody who did and who passed both. But, if you're going to do them both in the same year, you just keep in mind you're taking exams, one in March and one in May. And the time that you have, you're going to be studying for both at the same time, because studying just as for the second cycle exam within basically a month isn't going to be enough. That's the one thing I do want to say. I don't know what was said about the exam, but guys, you got to study. There are other area certifications that, say you need to study at least a minimum of 100 hours or whatever it is. They try to quantify it. I'm not going to try to quantify it because I don't know. I mean, every person's a little bit different. But don't think that just because you practice in this area that you know everything there is to know, because I'm going to guarantee you there's another way to do the exact same thing, on some of these principles. And we all have blind spots, and you've got to study. That one of the biggest things that area certification committees see when they're grading these exams, people who maybe know what they do day in and day out pretty well, but they have no idea about other areas of elder law, and that's not going to be a successful exam. If you get really, really lucky, I don't know how you would do it and pull it out, but you've got to study. There's no way around it.
Amy, I think I know the answer to this question, but you would know, being dual certified. Can you count, let's say, what our annual update? Do those double count for both of your certifications?
Thank God, yes. Okay. Or else I would be going to CLEs my entire life. I would be doing nothing other than that. But yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I guess, we're wrapping up. This has been phenomenal hearing everyone's experience. They're all a little unique. Does anyone have any last word for our attendees before we sign off and get on with our Fridays?
Hey, Danielle, I just wanted to point out that you still have a question in the question box about the October 13th CLE.
Yeah, I was going to handle that. Yes. So Emily, our section administrator, and I are nailing that down today. You should be receiving, if you are an elder law section member, an email blast out for registration. And again, I did not pay our panelists to talk about these speakers and how great their materials are, but it worked out fabulously for me. So Colette Small, Twyla Sketchley, David Lillison, and Emma Hemnes will be speaking on some of the core topics: Medicaid, public benefits, guardianship, and capacity planning. It is going to be phenomenal. So that email blast, it will be in your inbox in the next couple of weeks.
Can I just say one thing about this as a parting sort of word?
Yeah.
The way that I approached the exams when I took them is I knew they were going to be super hard. And I studied, though, with the intent not about whatever the final outcome was. I couldn't really control that. I studied with the intent to be a better lawyer. I figured no matter what happens, I'm going to come out of this knowing more than I did when I went in. And that took a lot of the stress and the pressure off. And it shifted my focus to where no matter what happened, it was kind of a win-win for me. So for me, that was a very good way to approach it. And I just offer that as maybe a little tidbit in case it resonates with one of you.
Thank you. Jason, Jen, Vicki, anything?
I was just typing into the filling the answers about the cases on the application to prove your practice. I just use my practice management software to do that. I went in, I entered that time period. I printed out every case I had, whether it was litigation or guardianship or whatever, because it says the type of case in my practice. And then I redacted out, obviously, all my clients' names and information, but that gave me a list of everything, and that made that very easy and fast.
Good idea.
I visited the board certification table at the annual convention, and I got some cool swag, but I also got to meet the individual. Amy, remind me of her name. She's in charge of yes, I met her, and I said, oh my gosh, I'll never forget you. You sent me an email that said I got board certified. Thank you so much. And she's like, I really did nothing. She's like, you did the work.
Best message ever.
But I feel like people either, she's sending some very stressful information to people, but she was very nice. So.
Yeah,
So
she is.
what-
She's awesome.
One thing I might add, Danielle, before we leave is just the thought that I think it can be easy when you're a practitioner, you've got to, book a business, you have, partners or bosses, whoever that you're having to answer to while you're studying to take this exam, which is incredibly important. Treat the exam prep and the studying as a client. Like, this is a really important client. When you put time on the calendar, you need to stick that. You do not need to be moving that around or saying, I can do this later. Nope, that is a commitment that you need to follow through on. It's just like a client, like a paying person or non-paying person, but that's a commitment. And if you stick to that, you're going to be fine.
Great advice.
Thank you guys so much for taking time. Big round of applause for Jen on passing one of our newest board certified elder law attorneys. And thank you everyone for taking time out of their Friday, and look out for our email for our October 13th board certification CLE. And it's there for either you're taking it now or thinking about taking it or new to elder law. It's very comprehensive. So
Yep, great.
thanks guys.
Good job.
Oh, good to see
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.